In our previous video, we looked at finding the median and quartiles, and now we want to extend that into our next type of display, which is the box plot. So box plots, also known as box and whisker plots, they can also display numerical data. So keeping up with our displays, we've got our stem plot, our line graph, our dot plot, histogram, and now box plots, all for numerical data. And we've got our bar graph for our categorical data. So box plots are constructed from 5 different values. You have the smallest value, or your minimum, and then you have the first quartile, or Q1, like we just discussed, the median, the third quartile, and then the largest value, or your maximum. And we can use these values to compare how close other data values are to these values. When you're building a box plot, my suggestion is to start in the middle with your median, and then work your way out to the quartiles, and then work your way out to the min and the max. So in the previous data set, I would start with 7 at the middle. I would work my way down to Q1, which is 2, and then up to Q3, which is 9, and then down to the minimum at 1 and the maximum at 11.5. And just to show you what a box plot or a box and whisker plot looks like, we've got this on the next page. A box plot for that previous data set, the number of hours that a 2-month-old baby sleeps, would look like this. And again, you want to start in the middle and work your way out. So here, where the 2 boxes meet, this is our median. We had a median of 7 that we calculated. And then the lower box extends down to Q1, which we just saw in the previous data set was 2. And the upper box extends up to Q3, which was 9. So you can see how the 2 boxes are made from the median and the lower and upper quartile. And then on the edges, you've got these whiskers that extend down to your lowest value, or your minimum, at 1, and then to your highest value up here at 11.5 as your max. And again, these quartiles are splitting our data into 25 percentage point pieces. So this box is about 25% of your data in between 2 and 7, as well about 25% of your data is in between 7 and 9. 25% of your data is in this whisker and this whisker. So always about 25 percentage points in that. Now, you may have some values that you might think could be outliers in your data set. On the box plot, it's important to note that the outlier is represented with an asterisk, and the whisker extends to the last piece of data that was not an outlier. So we can't just say, oh, I think this data piece is an outlier, but we have to show why it may be an outlier. So we've got some mathematical formulas that we can use to determine, is this value actually an outlier or not? So we say on the upper side of our data, on the right-hand side, any data piece above Q3 plus 1.5 times Q3 minus Q1, those quartiles, any piece above that is classified as an outlier. It acts as a fence. And same thing on the lower side, on your left-hand side of the data, any piece below Q1 minus 1.5 times that Q3 minus Q1. Anything within that is considered typical, but anything outside of these fences classified as outliers. For example, if we move to example 4 here, test scores from a college stats class are displayed below. We want to determine if there are any outliers and create the corresponding box plot. So first off, are there any outliers? So if I look through my data, I first off note that it's not in order, which is going to be a problem. When I try to find the median, I have to reorder it when I go to find the quartiles as well. But if I just quickly look through, I see it starts with a 98, which is a pretty high score. But if I look through, there's another 98 here and then another 90. So the 98s, they don't seem too unusual. I mean, there were several A's, just thinking about whether or not there are any outliers. But I do know that this last score, I've got a 25.5, which is significantly lower than a lot of the other scores. So maybe I've got a lower outlier here. Again, I'm not too concerned about upper outliers because the highest value is 98. There are two 98s and there's another 90. But 25.5, that's quite a bit lower than the next lowest score, which is 45. So I'm seeing an almost 20-point drop in test scores there. So I'm concerned that maybe 25.5 is an outlier. So I'm going to use this lower fence. Anything below this calculated value is going to be an outlier. So I need to find, well, what is Q1 and as well, what is Q3? I could rearrange this data. I could put it in order from smallest to largest, find the median, and then find the quartiles. You can also use your calculator to find the median and quartiles. So let me show you how to do that over here on my calculator. So if we come over here to the calculator, the first thing I want to do is get my numbers into the calculator. And the good thing about using the calculator is you don't have to put it in order ahead of time. So we'll go to Stat and enter to edit. Now I've got some old data in here, and you may have old data too. So to get rid of it, you hit the up arrow, clear, and enter. Got to clear out L2 and L1. So up, clear, and enter gets rid of those numbers. And now I'll just enter in the numbers from my data set. And again, I don't have to put them in order, so I'll start with my 98 and my 78, my 68, and then on through the list. You can see I've got a typo here. Let me clear this out. So 83, then 81, 89, 88. And my last value, 25.5. So all of my data pieces are now in, and now I can make my calculation. I can go Stat over to Calc, and I want to select this one bar stats. I've got one variable I'm looking at. I'm looking at these statistics test scores, and I want the statistics on them. So I hit enter, and then enter again. You may have a newer software. You have to hit enter 3 or 4 times to get the values to pop up. I've got some important values here that we'll talk about in the next set of notes, but if I scroll down using the down arrow, then I can see, well, there's Q1 at 78, there's my median, it's 81, and there's Q3, my upper quartile, it's 89, and I didn't have to reorder or worry about, do I average these or where do I go from here? All of my values are there. So now to see if I have any lower outliers, I can use that fence. Lower fence was Q1 minus 1.5 times Q3 minus Q1. And so Q1 I can see is 78 minus the constant of 1.5. And then Q3 minus Q1, that's 89 minus 78. That is just the number 11. So I'm looking at 78 minus 1.5 times 11. I'll use my calculator to find that. So 78 minus 1.5 times 11. My calculator is going to do the order of operations for me, which is nice. So that is 61.5. Any value below 61.5 is classified as an outlier. So that means 25.5 is indeed an outlier. And 45 is also an outlier in the data set. So I do know I've got 2 outliers, and I'll take that into account when I create my box plot, which is what I'm going to do in my next video. So I'll stop this one here and then look at the next video.